Well, here's the moment you've all been waiting for. We now move into the most practical chapters of the book. Of course, the theories of language teaching are important, but probably most of you are more interested in getting ideas about how to teach language skills. We need to remember, as we see at the beginning of this chapter, that we will almost never just teach one skill. In natural communication, we integrate at least two skills together, like speaking and listening. So it will be the same in teaching. But in order to concentrate on each particular skill, we are going to focus on each skill independently. Let's move on. In each chapter from chapter 15 to chapter 19, listening, speaking, reading, writing, and grammar instruction, we will be looking at both the theories behind teaching the language skill as well as some practical ideas to use in the classroom. I hope that you'll be able to link the theories we discuss to practical ideas, as well as increase the bank of ideas for techniques to teach that skill. Here are the topics for this chapter. There is a lot in here, so make sure you have your drinks and popcorn ready. We'll start by discussing a few points to consider when you are teaching, then look at important ideas to think about when using activities in the classroom. Well, we are going to start with our usual discussion. First up, I would like you to think about your own listening proficiency. In fact, I would like you to put your proficiency on a scale from 0, where you think you don't understand a thing, to 100, where you regard your listening as the best of the best of the best. Also, I want you to give some reasons why you give yourself that score. Don't be shy or modest, be honest, and give what you feel is a true evaluation of your listening skills. When we think about listening, we need to be aware of the two main types of spoken language. We have monologues, planned speeches often read from a script, kind of like what you are listening to now, and dialogues, which are usually less planned and, obviously, conversational. Usually, you'll find monologues a little easier to follow because there is less redundancy and usually have clear structure. Dialogues between two or more people will be a little more difficult for various reasons, which we will get into in the next slide. A key word for listening and reading to a lesser degree is schemata. Schemata is your background knowledge about the topic being spoken about. If you don't have enough background knowledge, even in your first language, you won't be able to understand what is going on, regardless of how easy the language being used is. So, for example, I could talk about how to fly an airplane in super simple English, but unless you have knowledge about airplanes, it will be difficult to comprehend. This is why it is important to get basic knowledge in a wide range of topics. Now, whether it be monologues or dialogues, listening is difficult. It is certainly not passive and not a one-way process. Also, just because you hear what was said, it doesn't mean you have completely understood the message. Our textbook gives us 8 main reasons that make listening difficult. Let's have a quick look. First, when speaking, we don't speak in individual words, but chunks. Picking out these chunks can be tough from time to time. Second, we have redundancy. Especially in dialogues, the other speaker will use small, meaningless parts of language, such as you know and I mean. These redundancies can make it difficult for listeners to catch the real message. Next, we have reduced forms. When reading, we can see the words clearly, but when speaking, we drop sounds and words, making it harder to catch. Performance variables are when speakers use grammatically incorrect sentences or have many hesitations and false starts in their speech. These will regularly occur in dialogues, but not so often in monologues. Many speakers may use slang and colloquial language, so you need to understand the culture of the speaker. Some people speak very quickly, and unlike reading, you can't always go back and listen again. You only have one chance. Stress, rhythm, and intonation make listening difficult. English is a consonant-vowel-consonant CVC rhythm, whereas some other languages, like Japanese, use a consonant-vowel CV rhythm. So for example, the word strike has a CVC rhythm, sh-ik. But in Japanese, it is sutoraiki, CV, 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 CV. These differences make it pretty tough. Then finally, we have interaction. To improve your listening skills, you need to remember that it is not just you in the listening process. Learning to respond to the other person and negotiate meaning through, for example, asking for clarification and giving feedback will help you understand more. Alright, it's time for a discussion. We have just gone through 8 reasons why listening can be difficult. Which one or ones did you find relate to you the most? Do you have any experiences in the past when you had trouble understanding what was being said due to one of the difficulties described? Be ready to share your stories and experiences with your group members in class. When discussing strategies for listening, we need to consider both micro skills, the smaller, more detailed parts of language, and macro skills, the larger, more overall parts of language. The list on page 327 is well worth checking out, so spend a few minutes looking through to get an idea of what listening skills you need to be teaching in the classroom. Talking about the classroom, before we start teaching, we want to make sure we are clear about what we want students doing when practicing listening. There are 6 great ideas in our book, so let's have a quick look. The most basic and least active form, reactive, is just to listen. There is no concentration on meaning. You could have students repeating if you like. Then we have intensive listening, in which students are listening carefully for specific parts of the language. Longer sentences might be used to show elements such as stress or grammar. To increase the intensity of the listening practice, we can use responsive techniques. This is when students are required to actually answer in appropriate ways. Selective listening has students listen for specific information within a larger speech or conversation. When we use extensive listening, we want students to get an overall understanding of the entire speech. We could ask students to take notes or have a discussion regarding the content of what they had heard in this kind of practice. And finally, the most intense listening practice is interactive. This is when students are actively participating in discussions. A lot of what is being said will be unplanned, making this the most authentic of what has been explained in this slide. So now that we know what we want students doing, we need to think about what we need to be doing. There is a list of 7 principles on pages 330 to 333. We don't have time in this video to go through each one in detail, so I'm just going to quickly look at numbers 4 and 7. I will add, though, that number 6 is pretty good too. I am always of the opinion that non-native speakers of English are better at teaching listening skills because they are better prepared to pass on strategies. Anyway, number 4 tells us about the importance of having questions not only after, but before and during the task. Pre-listening questions help students focus more and encourages selective listening, while post-listening questions can help develop extensive listening. Many teachers forget about while listening techniques, such as note-taking, so make sure you add those to your listening class too. We also want to try to include both bottom-up and top-down techniques. Bottom-up listening processing refers to when we focus on the small parts of language, then move to the overall meaning. Top-down processing is when we call upon our background knowledge, then consider the overall meaning. When we listen to our native language, we tend to combine both bottom-up and top-down listening processes, but many language students tend to just use top-down when listening to the target language. try to develop activities which encourage a combination of these processes. And finally, we have assessment. I'll try to keep it short. You need to be aware that here we are referring to assessment, the ongoing observations of students' linguistic development, not testing, which is a part of assessment in which the students get a score. The tough thing about assessing listening is that you cannot see it. One of the best ways is just to observe your students' reactions when you are speaking to them in the target language. The more you are able to pinpoint exactly what you want to assess, the more accurate your observations will be. There is a good list on page 342 to consider when you are assessing the micro and macro skills that we talked about earlier. We'll finish off with our final discussion. I would like you to design one activity to help students improve their listening proficiency. You can use the ideas on page 334 and 338 to help you, but I really hope you'll come up with something original. Well, that is it for Chapter 15. There really was a lot to cover, wasn't there? I did try my best to keep it as concise as possible. Be sure to review the video if you need to, and I'll see you in class. Bye.